So after I teach you this module, you will be able to know about the concept of self. You will also understand to identify self-concept in the context of personality, and also understand the various personality theories widely used to define self-concept and the personality. Let us begin by defining self-concept. Psychologists Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow were the first to identify the notion of self-concept. According to Rogers, everyone strives to reach an ideal self. He hypothesized that psychologically healthy people actively move away from the roles created by others' expectations, and instead they look within themselves for validation. On the other hand, neurotic people have self-concepts that do not match their experiences. They are afraid to accept their own experiences as valid, so they distort them, either to protect themselves or to win approval from others. The self-categorization theory, which was developed by John Turner, states that the self-concept consists of at least two levels, a personal identity and a social one. In other words, one's self-evaluation relies on self-perceptions and how others perceive them. Self-concept can alternate rapidly between the personal and the social identity. Children and adolescents begin integrating social identity into their own self-concept in elementary school by assessing their position among their different peers. Let's say by age 5, acceptance from peers has a very significant impact on the child's self-concept, affecting his behavior and also his academic success. One's self-concept, also called the self-construction, self-identity, self-perspective or the self-structure, is actually a collection of beliefs about oneself. They include elements such as the academic performance, the gender roles in sexuality, and the racial identity. Generally, self-concept embodies the answer to a question, which is, who am I? One's self-concept is made up of self-schemas and their past, present and future selves. The self-concept is distinguishable from self-awareness, which refers to the extent to which self-knowledge is actually defined, consistent and currently applicable to one's attitudes and dispositions. Self-concept also differs from self-esteem, which is self-concept is a cognitive or descriptive component of one's self. For example, one may say that I am a fast runner, or somebody might say I am good looking, while self-esteem is evaluative and opinionated. For example, I feel good about being a fast runner. Self-concept is made up of one's self-schemas and interacts with self-esteem, self-knowledge and the social self to form the self as a whole. It includes the past, the present and the future selves, where future selves or the possible selves represent individuals' idea of what they might become, what they should like to become, or what they are afraid of becoming. Possible selves may function as incentives for certain kind of behavior. The perception people have about their past or future selves is related to the perception of their current selves. The temporal self-appraisal theory argues that people have a tendency to maintain a positive self-evaluation. They do this by distancing themselves from their negative self and paying more attention to their positive one. In addition, people have a tendency to perceive the past self less favorably. For example, I am better than what I used to be, and the future self more positively. Example, I will be better than what I am presently. So, what we can say is that self-concept is defined as the totality of individuals' thought and feelings having reference to him or her as an object. Moving on to the self-concept theory. The self-concept theory explains that an individual has a concept of self based on what they think, that is the actual self, and a concept of who they think they like to be, which we call the ideal self. This can be related to the key concept of psychoanalytic theory called the ego, which is similar to one's objective. So, it's similar to actual self, whereas superego can be seen as reflection of the ideal self. Let's talk about the organizational setting. Here, the concept of self is used to represent the self in front of others, and it shows how people perceive image and works of others who work with them. Let's move on to personality. We all know that personality concerns the whole person, but very few people know that it involves the person's attitudes, his perspectives, beliefs, values, mental and other personal characteristics. It is the totality of all of the individual's dispositions and motives to behave in a certain way. The determinants of an individual's personality thus indicate all factors that affect his or her attitudes, values, competencies, etc. Personality refers to individual differences in characteristic pattern of thinking, feeling and behaving. Personality psychology in the workplace reveals the exciting new developments being made in the area of measurement and methodology, demonstrating the indisputable relevance of personality theory in the workplace, particularly in the areas of personnel selection, job performance, worker management, and the study of leadership. There is a very important model of individual behavior which is called MARS, M-A-R-S. This model states that there are 4 factors which have combined effect on the individual's performance. If any factor weakens, employees' performance will automatically decrease. Individual's behavior is influenced by MARS, Mars, which is motivation, ability, role perceptions, and the situation factors. What is motivation? Motivation consists of internal forces that affect the direction, intensity, and persistence of a person. Voluntary choice of behavior of a particular person. Ability includes both the natural aptitudes and learned capabilities required to successfully complete a task. Role perceptions are a person's belief about what behaviors are appropriate or necessary in a particular situation. And the situational factors are actually environmental conditions that constrain or facilitate an employee's behavior and performance. Well, 5 types of behavior are difficult most often in organizational behavior literature, which is the task performance represents physical behavior as well as mental processes that support the organization's objectives. Organizational citizenship refers to behavior that extends beyond the employee's normal job duties. Counterproductive work behaviors are voluntary and potentially harm the organization by directly affecting its functioning or property, or by hurting the employees in a way that will reduce their effectiveness. Joining and staying with the organization is a 4th category of work-related behavior. The 5th type of work-related behavior is work attendance. Values are stable, evaluative beliefs that guide our preference for outcomes or courses of action in a variety of situations. They influence our decision and interpretation of what is ethical. Now, people arrange values in a hierarchy of preferences called a value system. Shalom and Schwartz grouped dozens of individual values described by scholars over the years into 10 broader domains, which are further reduced to 4 quadrants of a circle. Organizations need to pay attention to value congruence, the similarity of values across the system, such as individual with organizational values. Next, we are going to talk about the various dimensions of personality. 6 values that differ across cultures are individualism, collectivism, power distance, uncertain avoidance, achievement versus nurturing orientation, and lastly, long versus short term orientations. For values that guide ethical conduct, unilateralism, individual rights, distributive justice, and care. 3 other factors that influence ethical conduct is the extent that an issue demands ethical principles, that is the moral intensity, the person ethical sensitivity to the presence importance of an ethical dilemma, and situational factors that cause people to deviate from their moral values. Companies improve ethical conduct to the code of ethics by ethics training and having ethics ombuds offices, and the conduct of the corporate leaders is set as examples. Personality refers to the relatively stable pattern of behavior and consistent internal state that explain a person's behavioral tendencies. Psychologists continue to debate the origin of personality, but most believe it is shaped by both heredity and environmental factors. Most personality traits are represented within the big 5 personality dimensions. CANOE, C-A-N-O-E. C stands for conscientiousness, A is for agreeableness, N neuroticism, O openness to experience, and E extroversion. Conscientiousness is relatively strong predictor of one's job performance. The Myers-Briggs type indicator measures how people prefer to focus their attention, collect information, process and evaluate information, and orient themselves to the outer world. Another popular personality trait in organizational behavior is the locus of control, which is a generalized belief about the amount of control people have over their own life. The dimensions of personality are as follows. Number 1 is extroversion. Extroversion is characterized by the breadth of activities as opposed to depth, surgency from external activity situations, and energy creation from external means. The trait is marked by pronounced engagement with the external world. The extroverts enjoy interacting with people, and they are often perceived as full of energy. They tend to be enthusiastic, and they are also action oriented. Extroverts possess high group visibility, they like to talk, and they also like to assert themselves. Introverts have lower social engagement and energy levels if we compare them to extroverts. They tend to remain quiet, they are low key, they deliberate, and they are less involved in the social world. Their lack of social involvement should not be interpreted as shyness or depression. Instead, they are more independent of their social world than the extroverts. Introverts need less stimulation than extroverts and more time alone. This does not mean that they are unfriendly or they are antisocial. Rather, they are reserved in social situations. The next component that we are going to talk about is agreeableness. The agreeableness trait reflects individual differences in general concern for social harmony. Agreeable individuals value getting along with others. They are generally considerate, they are kind, generous, trusting and trustworthy, helpful and willing to compromise their interests with others. They also have an optimistic view of human nature. Disagreeable individuals, on the other hand, place self interest above getting along with others. They are generally unconcerned with others' well being and they are less likely to extend themselves for other people. Sometimes their skepticism about others' motives causes them to be suspicious, unfriendly, and uncooperative. The next point that we are going to talk about is conscientiousness. Now, conscientiousness is a tendency to show self discipline, act dutifully, and aim for achievement against measures or outside expectations. It is regulated to the way in which people control, regulate, and direct their impulses. High scores on conscientiousness indicate a preference for planned rather than spontaneous behavior. The average level of conscientiousness rises among young adults and then declines among older adults. Neuroticism. Neuroticism, is the tendency to experience negative emotions such as anger, anxiety, or depression. It is sometimes called emotional instability or is reversed and referred to as emotional stability. According to Eysenck, in 1967, when he gave the theory of personality, neuroticism is interlinked with low tolerance for stress or aversive stimuli. Those who score high in neuroticism are emotionally reactive and vulnerable to stress. They are more likely to interpret ordinary situations as threatening and minor frustrations as hopelessly difficult. Let's talk about openness now. Openness is a general appreciation for art, emotions, adventure, unusual ideas, imagination, curiosity, and a variety of experience. People who are open to experience are intellectually curious. They are open to emotional sensitivity, to beauty, and they are willing to try out new things. They tend to be, when compared to close people, more creative and more aware of their feelings. They are also more likely to hold unconventional beliefs. We can talk about gender differences here. Cross-cultural research has shown some pattern of gender difference on the responses to Neo-PIR or the Big Five inventory. For example, women consistently report higher neuroticism, agreeableness, warmth, which is an extraversion facet, and openness to feelings. And men often report higher assertiveness, which is also a facet of extraversion, and openness to ideas as assessed by the Neo-PIR. A study of gender differences in 55 nations using the Big Five inventory found that women tend to be somewhat higher than men in neuroticism, extraversion, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. The difference in neuroticism was the most prominent one and consistent, with significant differences found in 49 out of the 55 nations surveyed. Gender differences in personality trait are largest in prosperous, healthy, and more gender egalitarian cultures. Well, a plausible explanation for this is that acts by women in individualistic egalitarian countries are more likely to be attributed to their personality rather than being attributed to ascribed gender roles within collectivist traditional countries like ours. Differences in the magnitude of sex between more or less developed world regions are due to differences between men and women in their respective regions. Men in highly developed world regions are less neurotic, extroverted, conscientious, and agreeable as compared to men in less developed world regions. Women, on the other hand, tended to differ in personality traits across regions. The authors of the study speculated that resource poor environments, that is, the countries with low levels of development may inhibit the development of gender differences, whereas resource-rich environments facilitate them. This may be because males require more resources than females in order to reach their full development potential. The authors also argued that due to different evolutionary pressures, men may have evolved to be more risk taking and socially dominant, whereas women evolved to be more cautious and nurturing. Ancient hunter gatherer societies may have been more egalitarian than later agriculturally oriented societies. Hence, the development of gender inequalities may have acted to constrain the development of gender differences in personality that originally evolved in hunter gatherer societies. As modern societies have become more egalitarian again, it may be the innate sex differences that are no longer constrained and hence manifest more fully in less developed cultures. Currently, this hypothesis remains untested as gender differences in modern societies have not been compared with those in hunter-gatherer societies. We are going to talk about work success now. There's a lot of controversy which exists as to whether or not the big five personality traits are actually correlated with success in the workplace. It is believed that the big five traits are predictors of future performance outcomes. Job outcome measures include job and training proficiency and personnel data. However, research demonstrating such prediction has been criticized, in part because of the apparently low correlation coefficients characterizing the relationship between personality and job performance. In a 2007 article co-authored by 6 current or former editors of psychological journals, Dr. Kevin Murphy, a professor of psychology at Pennsylvania State University and editor of the Journal of Applied Psychology, states, "The problem with personality tests is that the validity of personality measures as predictors of job performance is often disappointingly low. The argument for using personality tests to predict performance does not strike me as a convincing one in the first place." Well, such criticisms were also put forward by Walter Mischel, whose publication caused a 2 decades long crisis in personality psychometrics. However, later work demonstrated that number 1, the correlations obtained by psychometric personality researchers were actually very respectable by comparative standards, and number 2, that the economic value of such incremental increases in prediction accuracy was exceptionally large given the vast difference in performance by those who occupy complex job positions. There have been studies that link national innovation to openness to experience and conscientiousness. Those who express these traits have showed leadership and beneficial ideas towards the country of origin. Some businesses, organizations, and interviewers assess individuals based on the big five personality traits. Research has suggested that individuals who are considered leaders typically exhibit lower amounts of neurotic traits. They maintain higher level of openness, that is envisioning success, balanced levels of conscientiousness, that is they are well organized, and balanced level of extroversion. They are outgoing but not excessive. Further studies have linked professional burnout to neuroticism and extraversion to enduring positive work experience. When it comes to making money, research has suggested that those who are high in agreeableness, especially men, are not as successful in accumulating income. Moving on to the criticisms of this. Much research has been conducted on the Big Five. This has resulted in criticism and support for the model. Critics argue that there are limitations to the scope of Big Five as an explanatory or predictive theory. It is argued that the Big Five does not explain all of the human personality. The methodology used to identify the dimensional structure of personality traits, factor analysis, is often challenged for not having a universally recognized basis for choosing among solutions with different number of factors. Another frequent criticism is that the Big Five is not theory driven. It is merely a data driven investigation of certain descriptors that tend to cluster together under factor analysis. There's also a criticism of limited scope. It's a very common criticism that Big Five does not explain all of the human personality. Some psychologists have dissented from the model precisely because they feel it neglects other domains of personality such as religiosity, manipulativeness, honesty, sexiness, seductiveness, thriftiness, conservativeness, of humor, risk-taking, thrill-seeking. Dan P. McAdams has called the Big Five as a psychology of the stranger because they refer to traits that are relatively easy to observe in a stranger. Other aspects of personality that are more privately held or more context dependent are excluded from the Big Five. Why study personality in organizational psychology? Understanding different personalities will help in understanding the competence of employees at the workplace. How personality affects the motivational levels and abilities of employees is also very important. How personality and situational factors combines and affects behavioral results at work environment, that is the decision making. How personality is related to organizational citizenship and counterproductive work behavior. Personality also affects the task performance and maintaining of work attendance, but how does it do that? So let me summarize what I have taught you so far. Number 1, self explains how people perceive themselves at workplace as ideal self and actual self. Secondly, personality theories in organizational psychology explains 5 factors of personality which explain the task performance and work attendance. Mars model explains the connection between personality and role perception, ability, motivation and the situational factors. With help of studying personality, it becomes easy to understand the work environment. It also explains the selection of individuals for specific jobs as per their personality traits. It explains how individual reacts to situational factors as per the dominating traits he or she possesses.